Why, hello there, and welcome to yet another in our series of moderator movies, where we talk about ways of using the AP Bio teacher community in the best possible practice, I suppose. And so this one is going to deal with how to share resources optimally. And the reason I bring it up is just because recently we've had a couple of different instances where folks have very generously offered to share resources and have put up a description of the resource and then just sort of solicited emails. And soliciting emails on the list community is probably the least efficient and least pleasant way of going about sharing resources, particularly in this digital age. There's a lot of problems with that sort of approach, not the least of which is that it's really inconvenient for the person who's sharing resources to engage in that sort of thing, because they have to go on to the community and cull off all of the different email addresses to manually push out the resource. So I figured I would just talk a little bit about some other ways to do it. So obviously, the first and best place to go is the resource library. If you have a really nice resource, you can post it in the resource library, and certainly that's what it's there for. And remember that you retain all copyright and usage on those resources outside of the community. So please feel free to use the resource library. You can post links to things. You can post the actual documents. I think there's a 50 meg limit. So if you wanted something larger than 50 megs, you'd have to put it somewhere off list. But that's a really good place to go and do things. And of course, when you do that, you also get all sorts of links. So we'll use this recent one as an example. And so there's a link that you can go to, and you can actually share this link. You can share the resource by posting it to the community. So that's a really nice thing to do. You can talk about it. You can leave comments. So that's definitely, I think, a great way to go about it. But let's say, for whatever reason, you don't want to post it to the resource library, and that's fine, but you still want to share it. So there's a couple of different ways to do this. My preferred methodology is to use a public posting space. So I can just talk about two of them really quickly. I'm not endorsing one of them over any others. I happen to use Google Drive. I've used it for years now. And so all of my AP Biology materials are available in a public Google Drive collection that anyone can view. And then any folks with a Google Drive account, which of course is free, they can always use the file menu and select make a copy in order to make a copy of any resource that piques their fancy. And so I'm on an incognito account, so you can't really see that here, but it's certainly very easy to do and set it up. And so when you go to like my website, for instance, this is not me plugging my website, I promise, but if we go to my website and we just wanted to look at something, we can easily get to that resource just by going and clicking on it, and you'll notice that you'll get taken to a link when it's something that I have created. So if we go here, right, we can see that this is going to pop right up. It might take it a second, but so this is a document, and this doesn't know that it's me looking at it because I'm anonymous. And so if I created an account, I could just go and use the make a copy option, or I could just print off a copy. I could download a copy as a PDF or any one of another variety of formats. And I really like Google Docs for a lot of those different reasons, but it's certainly not the only way to do it. Dropbox is another really easy thing to do. And so if you do have a Dropbox, you can go to a public Dropbox folder, and you can, let me drag that in there for you. So you can actually, you'll have a public folder, and anything that you put in that public folder will generate a link. And then you can share that link with as many people as you want, and folks can access it. And you can actually do that in the Dropbox outside of the public too, but then folks, I think, do need to have a Dropbox account. I did have an issue with Dropbox once upon a time where I tried to share a really large file with the community, and I got massive traffic to it, and that triggered some sort of algorithm that Dropbox uses to cut down on piracy. They figured a large file size document that everybody was accessing might be some form of media file that I shouldn't be sharing. So that's actually what moved me over to Google Docs, but a lot of people use Dropbox without a problem, and certainly if it's minor documents, small things under 50 megs of size, I don't imagine it would be too much of an issue. So even if those two things don't apply to you, I suppose the other way that you might want to share things is you really want to control who has access to it for whatever reasons, copyright or otherwise. And if that's the case, I would encourage you actually to put up a Google form. And so you can do Google Forms in the Google Drive backend, and you can actually just post the link to the form. It's a public thing. And then folks can actually use that form and can give you their email addresses there. That way they're not posting their email addresses on the teacher community. They're not posting them in public. And you can go into that form and get them all in big batches, which is really, really helpful for you if you're trying to share a resource with hundreds of people. And that's the kind of traffic that we get on the community. Folks are sharing their resources with hundreds of people. It's much easier to pull them all off at once off of a spreadsheet on the back end than it is to have to go into the thread and pull them all off. The other thing that I'll just point out is, of course, that we have these URL shorteners that we can use. Goo.gl is one of them. Bit.ly is another one. You can go to bit.ly.com to get there. And these are just ways to take really ugly URLs and shorten them, which probably makes it easier to share URLs. So those are just a couple of tips. I am going to ask folks to use one of these methodologies. You can certainly use other tools than the ones that I've mentioned, but certainly don't solicit sharing of resources on the thread directly, because we just get these never-ending chains of people just posting their email addresses and asking to be added to any particular resource. And that can be really inconvenient for folks who do get their digests or do get their emails pushed out to them in the community. If it's just, 50 to 100 different emails coming in with just folks' email addresses on them, it does get to be a little bit ungainly. So these are some of the things that we'll be looking to do going forward. All right, thanks so much. I hope that this was helpful. And if you have any questions, of course, never hesitate to ask. Take it easy.